You're listening to the Resilient Author Podcast, the show that goes beyond the pages to explore the grit, courage, and resilience it takes to write and publish a book. I'm your host, Kary Youman, and each week I sit down with authors to uncover the stories behind their stories, the challenges they faced, the breakthroughs they experienced, and the wisdom they've gained along the way. Whether you're working on your first chapter or celebrating your launch, this is the place to find inspiration and practical takeaways for your own author journey. Let's dive in. Ray, so for those just discovering your work, what's your book about, and what sparked the idea to share this part of your life in such an honest way?
Yeah, the book, Me, Myself, and My Multiple Myeloma is a cancer patient memoir. When I was diagnosed with cancer, Kary, in March of 2019, I started, first of all, I learned an awful lot about myself. I became, kind of overwhelmed with the fact that, hey man, I'm a cancer patient. That cancer, sort of, how can that be, right? And kind of went down a journey of discovery. But I also, at the same time, had a lot of opportunities to participate in some interviews with media, both print media and video media as well, podcasts. And so I had people reaching out to me on social media platforms and asking me questions, and they tended to be from newly diagnosed patients, and kind of wanted to want to know what I was going through and what maybe they could expect with treatment and the like. Those are great. They're fabulous, and to this day they still remain some of the honors of my life, being able to engage with these cancer patient caregivers, allies, and the like. But I also thought it's one-to-one. Is there a way that maybe I can make this one to many? And how can I scale it? And so the idea of a book came up. So that's where the cancer patient memoir is, Me, Myself, and My Multiple Myeloma. And the real obstacle, I think, of getting across, to get over in producing a memoir, particularly a memoir about your health, is, one, you have to be, painfully honest, and you have to open everything up, right? And, a lot of people are hesitant to do that with their health. I felt as though there was more to gain from it than it was to lose. So let's open the book and, get people a behind the scenes look at my fight against cancer, and hopefully there'll be things that they can learn from it that help them or help their loved ones or what have you.
Mm. Wow. Yeah, I know cancer is something that it strikes a lot of people, and unfortunately not everyone is lucky enough to get through it. So yeah, wow. I imagine there's a lot. I imagine there's a lot in there, and ideally we'll dive into that a bit. I know for a lot of people, like, there's a question that kind of hits them before they decide to start working on a book. Maybe it's a feeling, maybe it's a thought, but what was it that made you say, like, I'm gonna write about this? Like, why this book?
Yeah, it was again, it was wanting to get the message out as efficiently as possible. One-to-one was fantastic, and I still love doing that. Through the book, I've been able to engage with patients and caregivers from all around the world, literally. New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, Egypt, Iran, Turkey, the United Kingdom, all over the United States. So it's an honor to do that. But also, how can you scale it? And part of it came back to having mottos. I'm always in search of a motto, Kary, because I'm a musician, and it's not something that's inherent with musicians, but it's inherent for me. Playing gigs is that a great way to get some little extra income is to sell a T-shirt. Get a band logo on the front and have some sort of pithy saying on the back, right? So I'm always on the lookout for what's the saying to put on the back of a shirt and make a few bucks. And so let me just share with you just hopefully it's a pretty short story on how the impetus for all of my books came about. The first one and certainly the second one, Me, Myself, and My Multiple Myeloma, and the three later. And that is, as I shared a little bit earlier, I learned a lot as a cancer patient. One of the first things I learned a couple of weeks in, I was absolutely exhausted. So exhausted that I couldn't read a P.F. Chang's menu going out to dinner with my wife, Lori, and her son, Raymond. And it dawned on me at that point in time, I'm like, why am I so tired? And it was this mental and emotional, burden that I've been carrying around for about a week and a half after my diagnosis that kind of dragged me down physically. And so that's when I became aware of the fact that my whole being is more than just my physical being or my mental being. That for me, I consider my emotional being and my spiritual being to be in there as well. And as a musician, I'm aware of a mixing board and, raising the levels up of certain things or levels, down at the others, different instruments, bass, treble and the like. And so, I recognize the fact that, part of my whole being, a strength, might be able to pull up those that might be lagging behind. But at the same time, those that are lagging behind, those considerations of my entire being might drag down a strength that I had. So, when I kind of was able to articulate that in my head, I thought, what else can I learn along this cancer journey, this cancer fight? And I almost immediately fell back to an exercise that I want to share with you, Kary, and your audience. It's a timeline exercise. And if those of you watching and listening out there have a piece of paper and something to write with handy, that's great. If you don't, simple exercise, you can do it in your mind. You just draw a horizontal line from left to right across the page or in your mind, one of the two. And on the far left-hand side, make a little tick mark. And far right-hand side, make a little tick mark. So you have a segment. Underneath the left-hand side, that tick mark, write the letter D. That's going to represent your birth. And then you're already ahead of me. On the other end of that segment, underneath that tick mark, write the letter D. That's going to represent your death. So the introspective part is you look at that timeline and you just, where do you believe? Where do you think you are on your timeline? Now we know intellectually that tomorrow's not promised, but where do you believe? Where do you think you are? And Kary, forever, when I facilitated that exercise in corporate America, I would always just kind of haphazardly throw my tick mark up right in the middle. I was going to live forever, at least 100. I was going to live forever, right? And at this time, I'm 54 years old, a freshly diagnosed cancer patient. And I think to myself, geez, Ray, you all used to be kind of like in the middle, but now you've been diagnosed with the incurable blood cancer. You're probably further to the right than you really thought you were. So what does that mean to you? So take a moment to think on it and go, you know what, Kary? I think that like a lot of human beings, I've been probably guilty for taking time for granted too often. I would take all tomorrows for granted, next week's for granted, next month, next year, depending on the topic, next decade. I always had these, if not now, when, or excuse me, I'm getting to that part. I always had this one day I will, ... And so I looked at that timeline and said, I take time for granted. How does that manifest itself? And really how it manifests itself is I take people and relationships for granted. Because if I take time for granted, if I have my dear friend Kary, I'm thinking about him today, but what, I'll connect with him tomorrow because he's going to be here tomorrow. I'll be here tomorrow, it's just fun. Or next week or next month. And next thing you know, time goes away, right? So the motto I came up with, I just shared it. It was like, if not now, when? What are the things that are most important to me? Let's concentrate on doing those things and let's bring along and share with the people that mean the most to me. So, that led to stories that I wanted to tell. The first book, Immaculate: How the Steelers Saved Pittsburgh, is really a story that came about from my co-author, Tom Olenek. He's the Yinzer. He's the guy from Pittsburgh. He's the devoted Steelers fan. But he had this idea that he thought about for years, decades, that would make a great book. And, finally, with my if not now, when philosophy, I grabbed him by the shoulders and said, Tom, you've been talking about this book with me for over 10 years. If not now, when? I'm the writer. How about I help you write this? How about if I get started? And if we ever veer off your vision, we'll course correct. We never had to. We hit it. It's a book I'm extraordinarily proud of. Just carrying that forward, Kary. If not now, when? I've got this story. I want to be a resource. I want to be an asset to the cancer patient community and the caregiver community. Well, if not now, when? Let's get it done. Put it out there. So that's really kind of the impetus was. Having a growth mindset and learning about myself and then realizing it was something I wanted to do, something I needed to put on the front burner and not, fall guilty to this one day I will ... That day is now. Let's get started and get it out there. And hopefully it's viewed as a resource. With the memoir, I've like I said, I've engaged with patients all around the world, their families, and it's been super meaningful for me. I certainly hope it's been meaningful for them as well.
Yeah, I really appreciate the simplicity of the visual that you created. I feel like there's something just really humbling about just the simplicity of your life starts here and it's going to end here. where are you? And from here, when are you going to start doing the things that you say you're going to do? That really resonates. So let's dive in just a little bit. So you were facing, I would imagine, probably one of the most toughest challenges anyone could experience with a cancer diagnosis while you were working on this book. How did that season change the way you approach storytelling, or even the way you see your own strength?
Oh, it was, I was diagnosed ahead of starting the book, right? So, but then, certainly during going through treatment, again, it kind of falls back to that, you have to, you have to give people a full, honest view of things. This book is meant to be written by someone in the community, for people in the community, and to benefit the people in the community. My net writers proceeds for me, myself, and my multiple myeloma benefit the Multiple Myeloma Research Foundation. And it was very important for me to have this kind of principled structure. And like, I can't be BSing fellow patients. So like a stem cell transplant, it's no big deal. You can do it. It's easy. It's not easy. You can do it. That's my message. You're stronger than you know. But it's not easy, and there are many days that suck, and sometimes at some periods more days that suck than don't suck during a stem cell transplant. But when you look at things week over week, over month, or what have you, you start seeing that this upward trend in your health. So it was it was revisiting bad times. Like the nausea associated with the chemotherapy that was associated with my stem cell transplant. Writing a chapter about how to deal with nausea. Wasn't great, losing my hair, and losing my hair very intentionally. I shaved down before I lost my hair. Those are all things that, were sometimes tough for me to revisit, but also tough for my family to revisit. My wife, my children, my tribe, my team that was behind me and still are with me to this very day. Sometimes it's difficult to revisit those.
Mm. Yeah, I can only imagine. I mean, was there like a particular, breakthrough or mindset shift that helped you to see sort of just like the bigger story beyond your own experience as you were going through that?
There were a lot of things, and one is and I've mentioned it, just in passing a moment ago, is that a message I certainly want to get out is that it might not be easy, but every human being I believe in my soul that, we are all stronger than we know. Right. So that's one thing that everyone, I hope, takes away from the book, and takes away and just is able to internalize. You are stronger than you know. You can deal with a lot of these challenges and these obstacles that life's going to throw in front of you. And the second thing that, I discovered is that together we're even stronger still. So I found out that I was stronger than I knew, but I also, this tribe and this team that was with me, Kary, some people have a journey with cancer and some people have a fight against cancer. My personality, it fits with the fight. A fight against cancer motivates me more, and it's kind of gone out of favor. We had the fight against cancer and the war against cancer kind of start with the Nixon administration, and when they used that, war analogy because it was propaganda. We need to raise a lot of money to address this issue. And there's nothing that raises, more awareness and more money through propaganda than like wartime type of talk, right? So, that was that war against cancer. A lot of people now don't like to refer to it as a fight or a war because, a fight, sort of, brings up the connotation that there's a winner and a loser. And I can tell you, going to the infusion center, there's not a single person in an infusion center sitting in an infusion chair that's a loser. I mean, these are bravest warriors I've ever come across. So, there are no losers. So I understand that. I understand that there's journeys. For me, there's a fight. And to get back to the point of my story here is that, I feel better mentally. I am so much stronger mentally going into my fight against cancer, knowing that there's not people behind me, Kary, but I've got this team that's alongside me, wading into this battle of mine with me. And that just energizes me. It gives me strength. So, messages I like to give out, is that I am stronger than I know. I believe that you are stronger than you know. And together, united, we are stronger still. There's always going to be someone for you to reach forward to and to receive a helping hand and pull yourself forward when you need it. And, if it needs to be me, people, reach out to me. I'd be happy to do it. My phone number is in the book. You can reach me on social media platforms with my name, Ray Hartjen. Last name is spelled Hartjen. That's my handle everywhere. My email address is rayhartjen@gmail.com. My website's rayhartjen.com. So if you ever need a helping hand, if I'm strong enough, brother, I'm going to reach back there and help pull you forward to where you need to be or where you want to be. Just like there's been times when I've been in need and I've been dependent on others to reach back and pull me forward.
Mm. As you were sharing that, Ray, I kept getting, I just kept hearing stewardship, servant leader. Did you grow up with this sort of belief, or is this something that this diagnosis has sort of given birth to?
And I'd like to say it was part of me before. It wasn't. Before my diagnosis, I was just kind of living in my own bubble. You mentioned earlier that cancer affects so many people. Cancer affects nearly everyone. Studies show that between 33 and 40% of all humans will be diagnosed with a cancer in their lifetime. So just those numbers alone means that somebody in your family, in your professional network, in your community, in your neighborhood, somebody that is going to be dealing with cancer at some point in time. So it affects practically nearly everyone, right? So that's one thing to know. But for me, before my diagnosis, I was kind of living in a bubble, and I like to think that I was a good guy with my charitable contributions and community involvement and stuff like that. But when I first got diagnosed, very early, I think it was like the week afterwards, I went to my first patient group meeting. And, those people kind of taught me how to be a cancer patient. Right? I mean, it sounds kind of silly, but, I'm sitting here around a table, and there's all these brave cancer fighters who have been diagnosed before me. First of all, they're living, right? And they're trying to live their best lives. They're not dying, they're living. And they just helped me get my mind straight around, being a cancer patient. And in my time of need, they were there for me. And, that's been a driving motivator for me. Soon after, I made up my mind. It's like, I want to be like them. I want to help others. That's the reason the book came about. I want to raise money for the Multiple Myeloma Research Foundation. I want to help patients. I want to help their caregivers. And, like I said earlier, it's been super rewarding. My wife and I were waiting for a performance to start a couple of months ago, and I saw us just kind of scrolling through Instagram, and I had a direct message in there from a guy who was recently diagnosed with multiple myeloma, and he was scared, but he was also uncomfortable in talking about his fear to his wife and his children. Yet he felt safe to be able to type out questions and feelings to me. And I'm just blown away. It's like, wow, this is such an honor that, a guy feels, a complete stranger at that point in time. Now we're connected, and we're, within the same network, same community, but, just such an honor for somebody, to feel safe enough with me to share their deepest and darkest thoughts and their fears and their insecurities. It's super rewarding. So, it's, this kind of idea of, being first of all, it's, being, I don't want to say a servant to others, right? But I do, want to be of service to others, but there's that immense gratitude that, has come into my life. With my cancer diagnosis, Kary, a person asked me not that long ago, would you change your diagnosis? It's like, oh, wow, man, that's a really good question. And it was on a podcast, so I felt as though I had to answer it, pretty quickly. So, instinctively, I went with my gut and said, you know what? I don't think I would change my diagnosis. I do not want to have cancer. It'd be great if I didn't have cancer. If somehow multiple myeloma becomes curable, I would love to be cured of multiple myeloma. But the changes that I have made in my life, I'm a better human. I'm a better father. I'm a better husband. I'm a better bandmate. I'm a better writer. I'm just a better person from having gone through this self-discovery that's been associated with my fight with cancer.
That's powerful. I'm just getting to know you as well, and just doing a little bit of research. It's obvious that you've become an advocate for people, navigating serious illness, and also for the, the caregivers who support them. What would you say you've learned from those conversations that has actually shifted your understanding of courage or community?
First of all, there's so many of us, and we all have so many commonalities.
Mm,
We're both in America, and we're facing this really weird political time where we're so divisive as a country. We've kind of forgotten what we're the United States for a reason. And the
mm,
strength that we've had for over almost 250 years has been our ability to unite around things. And yet we bicker and fight so much around 51-49 types of things, where
mm,
we have leaders in our society, that refer to other people as losers. That's just like the wrong mentality, man.
mm,
We're supposed to be working where we're all winners. That's what we're supposed to be doing, right? And when you get away from politics and geopolitical considerations and things like that, and just fall back on human to human, man, we are
mm,
all in this together. It takes a village. Nobody gets out of this alive. We all get something. When you start breaking it down just as a human level, we are all so similar to one another. And we can learn from one another. When we always need people. There's times when we need a helping hand, and there's times when we feel strong and powerful, we can lend a helping hand. And in both those instances, we should take advantage of that. When we need a helping hand, we should feel comfortable and safe to be able to reach out and to say, please help, and to be able to accept that help. And when we're feeling strong, we need to be, compassionate and empathetic enough to help pull others up to where they need or where they want to be. I think that's the thing I've kind of learned. It was really cool. Earlier this year, a group of women from Iran reached out to me, and I'm like, wow,
mm,
that's pretty cool. Particularly considering their cultural, norms, and then also just the geopolitical considerations between an American and an Iranian, and a small group of Iranians. It was super cool. Our commonality was multiple myeloma diagnosis. That's something that outweighs all these other considerations, right?
mm. Yeah. I want to touch on something you sort of alluded to earlier. You were talking about your co-author or your friend. You were talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers. I know just from the homework I've done that you're a lifelong sports fan. You're into the Indy 500. What what parallels do you see between what athletes go through on the field and what everyday people face when life, tests their resilience?
Yeah, I think it's the process. We
Mm,
hear that sometimes as a fan, particularly when there's a team that needs to rebuild. It's like trust in the process. We need to rebuild, we
mm,
need a stronger roster or whatever. It's understanding that process. And a book that I published earlier this year, it was published by Morgan James. It's called the Indy 500, a year-long quest to win the greatest spectacle in racing. And it's to succeed at the Indy 500, it's not just a 3-hour race. It's not just the last lap of this 3-hour race, right? It's a year-long set of, activities and that go into just getting to the speedway in the month of May to begin to practice, and then from practice, you have to find the speed to be able to qualify for the race. Once you qualify for the race, then you're kind of starting all over again. Cause now instead of just going fast for 1 lap or for 4 laps, now you need to compete against 32 other cars on the track at the same time. And you need to go 500 miles. There's different considerations there. So now you have to build up speed again. So it's this long process that eventually gets you to the goals and objectives that you want to achieve. There's not shortcuts with it. Sometimes they're painful, and it's. I think a lot of times, I love what you do with this podcast, Kary. That resilient author is. There's a lot of times there's a tendency for creatives. Just like, I got this great idea, and they're looking at the end result. It's going to be, 80,000 words of this book, for example. And it's like, oh, I ain't got time for 80,000 words, and they said, they got this idea. They can see the finish line, but the finish is so daunting that they don't really even get started, and so, I like to really tell people, you can't shortcut the process, right? And in writing that 80,000 word book, really, if you do 500 words a day, which isn't a whole lot, in a half a year, 160 days, you'll have that 80,000 words, and your book will be done, right? So you can't get to the finish line unless you get to the start. I think as a parallel, it's certainly a parallel in motorsports, the Indy 500, parallel with all sports. There's this process. You just don't show up and do it. No, maybe if you're, you might think someone like Tom Brady used to do that or whatever, but it's not, when you found out it might seem on the surface, wow, you just play pro football and you're going to play in the Super Bowl and you're going to win most of them. No, when you look at all the work that he had to do and the process that needs to be undertaken, the challenges to be overcome, the obstacles to navigate, that's when you get to success.
Yeah. Speaking of Tom Brady, I mean, his sort of rise to being, some would say, the greatest quarterback of all time. I mean, he wasn't even a first round pick, was he? Wasn't he?
He wasn't even a second round pick or a third round pick. I'm going to say a fifth round pick or something like that. There are a lot of people picked in front of him. He worked hard for, from a young player in high school. Worked to become a college quarterback. He worked hard in college, to mine to the pros. Apologize for my dogs acting up there. Something's at the door and they need to protect.
No worries. Unless maybe they're Tom Brady fans. Who knows?
Lending support.
Ray. So, resilience it's a very personal thing for people. For you at this time in your life, what does it actually look like now for you day to day, especially now just on the other side of your book? I know you've written a couple books now, but what does resilience look like played out for you day to day?
Yeah, one thing that resilience is overcoming a fear of failure, and also, embracing feedback, even when it's constructive and it's not particularly positive, right? So my latest book, my fifth book, is a novel. It's called Outflanked. It says right on the cover, an espionage thriller, but that I feel a great deal of pressure having that right on the cover. An espionage thriller. It's supposed to be a thriller. You as the reader are supposed to look at it and go, oh, I'm thrilled. This is a thriller book, a thrilling book. And that to me is, it's nerve-wracking to put anything out there, whether it's a song, a book, an article, or what have you. For me, it's nerve-wracking to just, here, what do you think about it? And, reviews are so important for books. They help readers, choose to select a book. And it also triggers a lot of algorithms to come up with research as well. So, those types of things are sometimes difficult for me to overcome. They're mental challenges and mental hurdles where I've got to, I've got to actually seek this out, particularly people I know, man. I'm gonna, if I give a friend a book and say, hey, can you be a beta reader on this? That's like, hopefully they like it, because I want them to like, I get, it's something I came up with. So I think those are, that's one of the resilient factors that I've learned about, that I still struggle with. It's a daily struggle.
Absolutely. And speaking of that struggle, Resilient Author Podcast, there are a lot of aspiring authors who listen to this podcast. For anyone who's listening, sitting on a story, maybe it's tied to something painful or personal, what would you say to them about the power of just simply starting?
It's all about starting, Kary. It's and there's actually a parallel to the cancer patient community. When you go through chemotherapy treatments, one of the side effects for a lot of different chemotherapy modalities is fatigue. And people, I've just been many occasions in patient support groups where I've had people say, "Hey, man, I just want to clean my house, but I just can't deal with the thought of cleaning the house." And some of the things, sometimes I like to try to help. At least I hope it's a help, of saying, forget about cleaning the house. How about just like the dining room table? Let's today, get some of the clutter off of it and dust the dining room table. Maybe that looks good, and take a break there. But, don't think about the whole house. I don't have the energy. No, I don't think anybody has even a professional house cleaner is looking at a whole house going, man, I don't think I want to do this. Right. And so, get started. And even particularly if it's something painful, like, perhaps it's a cancer patient memoir that you're writing, the cathartic effects of you just jotting things down. I mean, a great many people journal, not for other people to see, but it's just to write it out and kind of collect their thoughts and organize their thoughts, and there's this cathartic effect of, to, maybe revisit some things and, think about your survivorship of those difficulties or what have you. So, get started, whether you want to share it with somebody or not. Isn't it Stephen King who said, write with the door closed and then, edit with the door open, follow that approach, write it. And if it's something that you, feel kind of proud of, then, open that door a little bit, and, share it with somebody, share it with a beta reader, ask them what they think, and like we've already discussed, Kary, sometimes that can be kind of nerve wracking. But let's not worry about that at this point in time. Just start writing, see how it impacts you personally. I mean, one of the things I most about creatives, I like the visual creatives, artists, painters. There's not a lot of market for painting, Kary. I mean, there just isn't, right? But, it's this intrinsic value that artists have of creating for themselves. They've made this picture for themselves. There's really, most 99.9% of the painters out there are not painting it and thinking they're going to have a gallery show or they're going to sell things like that. They're painting for themselves. And if they like something, or maybe one of the friends like, here, like you take it or something like that, that's that type of intrinsic joy, sense of satisfaction, inner peace of mind. That's something a writer should do. Write for yourself first. And then if you feel like it, start beginning to share it with others.
That's really well put. You mentioned that you're releasing your 5th book next week, actually, depending on whenever you listen to the podcast. But can you talk a little bit about the publishing process? Are you more traditional? Are you indie? And can you talk about how that process has sort of opened up for you or unraveled for you? Just what has your publishing experience been like?
That's a great question. And if you're an aspiring writer out there, I mean, that's a decision that you'll need to make. There's traditional publishing, there's self-publishing, and then there's hybrid publishing in the middle. And I personally believe that kind of everything is kind of hybrid publishing in a way at this point. So of my 5 books, 3 of them have been published by a non-traditional traditional publisher. It's a publisher called Morgan James out of New York. David Hancock is the CEO. He lives in North Carolina. Great organization. They're the ones who gave us a shot with Immaculate, How the Steelers Saved Pittsburgh. They also published my memoir, Me, Myself, and My Multiple Myeloma, and they published the Indy 500 book, the Indy 500 Year-Long Quest to Win the Greatest Spectacle in Racing. One thing that all writers need to be aware of is when, unless you are like Michelle Obama or somebody like that, Stephen King, your book is not going to be promoted and marketed by your publisher. They will try to find ways to talk about it, but if you go to like someone like Simon and Schuster, they're trying to get in there, note that they're going to publish in a year, just in the nonfiction category, 20,000 books or more. They've got room to promote like 4 of those a month. That's not you. Probably, so you are going to be responsible for selling and marketing your book. So with that being the reality of the matter, is, how do you compensate yourself for all that promotional work that you have to do? Self-publishing is a very viable prospect. If you're going to do all the work anyway, why not just self-publish? So my latest book, Outflanked, my novel, that is self-published under my own imprint. My imprint's Two Red Chairs Publishing. I figure, well, I'm doing all the legwork on it anyway. It's not going to be sold into bookstores. It's not, you're going to have to buy this online. My local bookstore might stock it, but probably not, right? So, it's definitely an option to consider. There are, within that kind of simple consideration, it's more than just promotion and marketing budgets and what a publisher will or will not give you. One thing publishers do tend to give you from the traditional publishers and the hybrid publishers is that they will design your book for you, interior design and cover design. And that can be expensive. Freelancers look for, book cover design to be about $1,500. That's a lot of books to sell to make $1,500. Interior design, if you have not published yet, you might think that interior design is what I thought it was when I first went through this process with Morgan James with the Immaculate book. And they're like, yeah, we got to go through interior design. I'm like, interior design, I've already done that. That's fun words. No, it's not. There is a lot that goes in to designing the inside of a book. And there's a cost associated with that too. It's something that you can do in self-publishing, but again, it's, time on the tools, and you're going to have to do it. So considerations to be given there. But it's, I love having the conversation with writers about traditional publishing or, hybrid publishing or self-publishing. And part of it's pitching the story. And, it's easier to pitch your second book than your first book. But you need someone to say, yeah, that's a good book. So, those of you out there who are thinking about going to market and publishing a book, lots of different choices, but within those choices, lots of considerations to make, depending on how much you want to invest, both the time and money, and what others can bring to the table for you.
I love the imprint, Two Red Chairs. Can you share a little bit about backstory on that?
Yeah, it's my wife and I, we have two Adirondack chairs in the backyard that are red. And, we like to go back out there and, typically on a Friday evening or Saturday evening, sit back with a glass of wine, watch the hummingbirds fly around or something like that. And, watch the sunset. So it's, together, a collaborative, happy place. Right. So that became kind of like the logical publishing imprint.
Love that. Love that. So, Ray, I want to take you through what I'm calling the lightning round. This is still a fairly new segment, but I'll ask you 3 questions and we'll just kind of run through them.
Excellent. I love lightning round. It sounds great. It sounds
Awesome.
great now until you put me on the spot, and then it might not sound so great.
I'll be nice. I'll be nice. So, what's one book or writer who's influenced how you see storytelling?
Bill Bryson. Are you familiar with Bill Bryson?
Bill Bryson.
Yes. Are you familiar with him?
I don't. I feel like I need to look him up.
Yeah, Bill Bryson is a guy who made his name as a travel writer. But one day he's sitting on an airplane and he's looking out the window and he's at 37,000 feet or something like that. And he goes, wow, now this is amazing. Just the science that goes into a metal plane flying in the air at 37,000, taking me around the world. And he started thinking, you know what? I don't know anything about the sciences. And so he went on a multi-year quest to learn a little bit about everything. And he wrote a book called something along the lines about a little bit about everything or something like that. I forget the exact title of the book. A brief, I think it might be a history of nearly, I don't know. We'll have to look it up. But it's a great book. It's I think my favorite nonfiction book that I've ever read. And it's just these fascinating little stories about sciences and the people, the scientists behind these sciences, and it goes from everything from astronomy to, oceanography, and everything in between. So it's to be able to communicate science to a knucklehead like me, needed to be the best storyteller ever. And Bill Bryson's a great storyteller. And he's done a lot of cool things. He has a biography on Shakespeare that's great. He did another exploration about the home, and everything that goes into, the history of homes from landscaping all the way up to, why it's called room and board. So it's a great storyteller and interesting man.
I may have to put that in the show notes. Thanks for sharing that, Ray.
Oh, can I do an honorable mention too?
Of course.
Honorable mention is a fiction writer named Andy Weir, former software developer or software engineer. And I believe from the Bay Area in California, who wrote The Martian, which turned into this fabulous movie, but the book's great. Wrote Artemis, and one of my favorite fiction books is Project Hail Mary, which is being made into a movie currently. I believe those books were all self-published, by the way, too. He's just a space nerd who had stories to tell, and he tells a wickedly good story.
I haven't read the book, but the Martian movie was really good. Matt Damon did a great job.
Yeah, it's an Andy Weir gig, and you'll like this next movie. I forget the guy who's in it. Good-looking guy that everybody loves. In Project Hail Mary, I'm sure it's going to be a huge movie, and I hope it is because the book was great.
Nice. Ray, if you could go back and talk to your younger self, what's one thing you would tell him?
Oh man, what a great question! It's a lightning round. I feel compelled. I need to, listen more than talk. Be more empathetic, be more considerate, be more compassionate, a little bit more outward focused as opposed to inward focused. I wouldn't say I was particularly selfish, but I had opportunities to be a lot more selfless. Or more selfless rather. So I think, yeah, that'd be the first one would be listen. As the audience already knows from listening in, I like to talk, but tell my younger stuff to listen more, to learn more.
It's a good reminder for us all. All right, Rick, can you finish this sentence? Writing my book reminded me that.
Man, you're good at this, Kary. Writing this book reminded me. What I want to say is it reminded me that I have a talent for telling stories, and that I think from through my professional career as a in corporate communications, public relations, organizational development, and marketing. It's the way that I've made points and fostered engagement and built relationships was storytelling, right? And we all want these stories. It's kind of intrinsically within us. When we're little kids, we're begging our parents to please tell me a story and all this, right? The messages resonate more when there's a story. And I think I'm a good storyteller. And I think the process of writing all my books, I sit back with a sense of pride and go, I think that's a good story. Or like in the case of the Immaculate book, it's really kind of a collection of maybe 60 or 70 stories with profiles of players and profiles of civic leaders of Pittsburgh and of the country. There's a lot of different aspects to it. So I think it's like a collection of stories. So yeah, writing the book reminds me that I'm a good storyteller. It's just my job is to figure out what's the best way of telling that story, and make sure it's a good one. It's an engaging one. That's a fun one, informative one, entertaining.
Yeah, you are a really good storyteller, Ray. So I like to sort of end the podcast with something I call the final chapter. If there's, let's say, one message you hope people carry from your story, whether, let's say, maybe they're facing illness, loss, or something uncertain, what would that message be?
It's another motto of mine. We talked about if not now, when. That kind of also transformed over time to punch today in the face. The idea that I want today to know that I was here, right? And if today was personified, give it a little knock in the face and grab its attention. It's like, dude, Ray was here. The message I want to give everybody out there, as it relates to if not now, when, as it relates to punch it in the face, as it relates to that timeline exercise and so forth. It's simply this. Today is a gift, and we intellectually know that not everybody received the gift of today. So how do we honor them? How do we honor the day? And how do we best honor ourselves? And I want people to reflect on that and get up off their ass and do the things that are most important for them, that are most meaningful for them, with the people that they love the most, because at the end of the day, they'll be able to sit back with a degree of inner peace, of sense of satisfaction and joy. And isn't that what we all want, Kary? Right?
Absolutely.
That's my message, man. Punch the day in the face. But before you get to, thinking about that, if you have to, think about the day. Think about the people who didn't receive the day. How do you honor them? How do you honor the day? How do you honor yourself?
I love that, Ray. You're almost like the poster child of what a resilient author is. I really, really appreciate this time.
I appreciate the opportunity, man. I like what you're doing. I'm so glad that we were able to connect. Hopefully we're able to, engage and connect with the audience. I am sincere, folks. When I talked earlier about, if there's anything I can do for you, whether you're a cancer patient or not, I hope you're not a cancer patient. I hope there's something else I can do for you. Please feel free to reach out to me. You can get a hold of me anywhere. My name, Ray Hartjen. You can also get a hold of me through Kary. And I will be happy to hear your stories, to listen to your stories, and to see how I can best serve you.
And just for the listeners who may be tuning in a little later, can you just share where your website or your social media handles are one more
Sure.
time?
Everything is my name, Ray Hartjen, RayHartjen. That's my website, rayhartjen.com. All my social media handles are Ray Hartjen, except for TikTok, which is Ray Hartjen 5. I think when I signed up, maybe I just got a little trigger happy with the thumbs or something like that. And then my email is rayhartjen@gmail. And yeah, reach out to me if there's anything I can do for you. We would love to hear your story.
Excellent, Ray. Thank you so much for being here. And yeah, looking forward to staying in touch.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, Kary. Thank you so much again for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Take care. Thank you so much for tuning into the Resilient Author Podcast. I hope today's conversation gave you both inspiration and practical tools for your own journey. If you've been carrying the idea for a book, but haven't started, or you started and feel stuck, I'd love to invite you to join my 5-day Speak Your Book Challenge. In just 5 days, you'll speak the outline of your first draft and discover how to turn it into a finished manuscript and a published book. You can join anytime at voicetobook.co/challenge. Until next time, keep going, stay resilient, and remember, your story matters.
You too.